Well, hi everyone. We just want to update you on what's happening at Lighthouse over the coming few weeks. Because of my role with the ACC, I just recently had some of my team talk to the health minister and give us a bit of an update on what's happening in and around the COVID restrictions. Well, unfortunately, those restrictions are still in place. We can only have up to 100 people in our building, and we're only able to have a few extra people on stage who can sing if they're distanced, but we ourselves as a congregation actually can't be doing the singing or the mingling at the moment.
But that's okay because we want to listen to the government because they are trying to keep our communities safe. But we still have our great online gathering every Sunday, every week.
Well, the good news is that earlier on in the year, we started talking about Lifestreams. And one of those live stream topics is discipleship. And it's come out of the stuff that we've been doing with Paul Gibbs. And Paul Gibbs has been teaching us how to disciple anyone, anywhere. Now, this is not just for those of you that have got leaders inside of church departments. This is for anybody who wants to move somebody forward in their faith and help them grow. So, Annette, you've been working hard with the team.
Yes.
Tell us what's happening.
Starting the 18th of October, we have what we call the Lifestreams, but particularly focusing on discipleship. I'm excited because not only is it Paul's content, but actually Lighthouse team have been developing this content to help our people actually move forward in this idea of discipling anyone, anytime, anywhere.
We want to use this time, as we've been saying, not just to, simply do and have online church. We want to use this time to train and equip you, because this is really, really important. So from the 18th, over 4 weeks, we want as many of you as you can. You've got to register for it, remember, because those numbers are limited. But we want as many of you to come. And you might be thinking today, I'm not sure whether that's for me. Well, it is. And we want you to be a part of it. And we'd love to connect with you over that time as well.
Don't forget about Connect groups. We believe they are important for you to grow your personal faith. Hey, let me invite you to contact Andy and he can help you get into a great group.
Yeah, let me know if Andy doesn't contact you. Okay, we are doing so many things around Lighthouse. A new series coming up called Lenses, just like these, because lenses are the way in which all of us view life, right? Mm-hmm. We all see life differently. Well, so does Lighthouse. And we have about 7 lenses that we look through. And on the 18th of October, on our online gathering, we're going to start that new series. We want you to join us. Hey, on behalf of Annette and I, we love you, we miss you, we appreciate you, but let's stay connected and keep growing in our faith. God bless.
Hello and welcome to all our Lighthouse online family. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We're going to continue our stories for our future by listening to our senior leader, Annette Bartlett.
The story of Messiah could be the most significant story for our future, for both us as individuals and the global community. It's a theme that flows right throughout the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. But actually, to do it justice this morning, I want us to look at a video that the Bible Project has produced to help us see the expanse of this story, the Messiah.
There's this crazy story at the beginning of the Bible. We have Adam and Eve, and they're in the Garden of Eden.
And everything in this garden is great. It's exactly as it should be, except there's this one tree that they're told by God not to eat from because it's dangerous and it will kill them.
So that's it. Avoid this fruit tree and we're fine.
Right. It seems pretty simple. But in this garden, there's a snake. And it starts telling a different story. It says that if you eat of this tree, it's not going to kill you. In fact, it's going to make you become like God.
And Adam and Eve, they believe the snake and they eat the fruit.
And because of this, the goodness of the garden is tragically lost and evil and death enters into God's good world.
Now, why is there a talking snake in the garden? I mean, this thing is a problem.
Yeah, it's very strange. And even more strange is the fact that the Bible doesn't say why or how this thing even got there. It just presents the snake as this creature who's in rebellion against God and that wants to get other people to doubt God's goodness and lead them on a path towards death. And so whatever this snake is, it's the source of evil that pervades our world and our lives, even still today.
But there is some hope because right here in the story, God makes this really interesting promise to Adam and Eve.
That someone is going to come in the future, a son of Eve. And this guy's going to come and he's going to crush the serpent's head and destroy evil at its source. However, during this battle, the serpent is going to bite this guy's heel.
So it's like a mutual destruction.
Yeah, it's this very strange but beautiful promise. And it's just left hanging there until the next key moment in the story, when God singles out this guy named Abraham and says that through his family, goodness and blessing is going to be restored back to all of the nations of the world. And as we follow this family, we get to one of Abraham's great-grandsons, this guy named Judah. And he receives this promise that a king is going to come from his line and that the whole world's going to follow this king and he's going to bring peace and harmony and there'll be lots of food and wine and milk and vineyards and it's going to be awesome.
The first king that we meet from the line of Judah is a guy named King David. And he's a hero. Maybe he is the snake crusher.
But it turns out that David is infected with the same evil as the rest of humanity. He never crushes the snake, just the opposite. However, God makes a promise to David that this king is going to eventually come from his line. But as you go on in the story, one by one, each generation of his sons, they're just total chumps. They give in to the snake, they choose evil, they go after money and sex and power and following other gods.
Things get so bad that they run the nation of Israel right into the ground, and the big bad empire of Babylon just takes them out.
And so now there are no more kings to even fulfill this promise.
So it seems like the whole plan is lost.
But during these dark days, there's this crazy group of guys called prophets, and they just kept talking about this coming king and reminding us of the promise that he'll come, he'll defeat evil, he'll restore the garden. Now, one specific prophet, Isaiah, he tells us more about why this king is bitten. Isaiah says that the promised king receives this wound because of humanity's evil, and that it kills him. But then all of a sudden he comes back, and Isaiah says it's because he suffered this wound that he can now become a source of healing to other people.
But the Old Testament ends, and the snake-crushing king that everyone's been talking about never shows up.
And this is why, when the New Testament begins, it introduces us to Jesus of Nazareth, not as some random guy, but as someone who comes to fulfill these specific ancient promises.
Yeah, we learn that he's from the line of David, Judah, and Abraham.
And he goes around Israel announcing that the goodness of God's kingdom is here, now. And he begins confronting the effects of evil on people by healing them, by forgiving them of their sins and evil.
Many people are now believing that this is, in fact, the promised king.
But Jesus began telling his closest followers that he was going to become king and bring peace by taking the full effect of humanity's evil into himself.
The fatal snakebite wound.
Exactly. And so it seems like the serpent wins. And this story actually would be a tragedy except for what happens next. Jesus rises from the dead.
And now Jesus has the power over evil and death for himself.
And so the rest of the New Testament is then making this claim that Jesus' power over evil and death has now become available to us to begin confronting the effects of evil in our lives.
But even still, death and evil are a real problem in our world all around us.
And so the story of the Bible ends by describing this future day when Jesus comes back and he finishes the job. He destroys the snake once and for all, and he restores the goodness of the garden here on earth.
As you can see, to do justice to this story, the Messiah, you have to look at the whole of the Bible and its effect in history up until this point. And in the short time we have today, we probably won't cover it all. So I encourage you to actually study this story called Messiah. Can I be really bold and say that I think this story is the plan that God has for you and I and for the rest of the world for our restoration and salvation. The story of Messiah actually addresses an important issue in our world and in our lives. It actually addresses evil in our world. I don't know about you, but when I've been talking to someone who doesn't yet believe in God or is interested in God, they ask this question: if God is so good, why is there evil in the world? I guess I want to talk just briefly about the word evil. I mean, it's an extreme word to use. We don't really use it in our everyday life. But it's good to define evil really simply as the absence of good. And when we think about good, that is those things that help you and I and humanity flourish in life. The Bible teaches us that there are two main sources of evil: the serpent and human brokenness. The first one is this idea of the serpent. Now, we've heard different names for that serpent, the devil, the evil one, but just know, like that video that we watched, that there is this dark presence, if you like, or this figure that the Bible talks about that does not have the best interest of humanity in its mind. So it's important to understand what this presence, this dark presence of evil is in our world. You know, as I guess secular people, we've been brought up in a worldview that says that all there is this physical material world, and that it could be hard to actually be aware of or understand that there is more in this world than that physical world. I have many experiences as I've travelled, particularly Indigenous people and other cultures actually have that worldview that there is more than the physical, that there is spiritual things, whether good or bad or evil, that are affecting their everyday life. As Western people of faith who have a culture that is secular, we have to understand that as we read the Gospels and read the ministry of Jesus, he did address this thing called evil and address the serpent in his ministry. One of the prophets in the Old Testament, Isaiah, actually talks a lot about the story of Messiah. And we know as Christians that our belief is that Jesus fulfills that story of Messiah, that it is him that will outwork that story. I want to read from Isaiah 61:1. And this is talking particularly about the purpose of the Messiah and what Jesus will do in his ministry on earth. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners. I wonder how much of our Western worldview influences our faith when we read things like that Jesus has come to set captives free, to set people free from darkness, what that means for us. I wonder if it's time to ask ourselves, is that secular worldview helping humanity like it should? Whether some of the thoughts and things we read in the Bible, like Isaiah, we need to once again be open to and ask God to help us understand how that works in a physical, material world. The second main source of evil that the Bible addresses is human brokenness. And I think there are two expressions of this. That is the evil that affects us outside of us, and also the evil that resides in us. Now, when I use that word evil, I wonder if that's too strong a statement. But I want to talk about human brokenness that affects us outside of us. I wonder if I described evil in this context. Things like sickness and disease, and abuse and violence, and ultimately death that affects us all. Maybe you would agree with me that this is an evil that affects us in our lives and in our world. Jesus the Messiah came to address the evil that affects you and I. In Isaiah 53:3-4, it says, "He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Jesus, the Bible teaches us, took the brunt of our human brokenness and frailty. It was at the cross that he gave up his life, that he was tortured, bruised, and killed in order to address this evil that affects you and I all the days of our lives. The second expression of human brokenness is the evil that resides in us. I know that's a confronting message, that we would think that there was evil that resides in us. But it's a very important thing for each of us to consider in our own lives. I know personally that it's something that has helped me understand the story of the Messiah when I understand why I need a Messiah, why I need a Saviour. The reality is that much of the evil in this world is caused by humans, whether they're bad behaviour or how they hurt or attack other people, that it's human beings that unfortunately are the ones that cause what we would call evil in the world. You know, it's important to understand that we have this vulnerability to evil in ourselves, because if we don't, then the story of the Messiah and what Jesus did for us is actually irrelevant and ineffective to help us in our lives. I want us to go back to that story, back to the garden, if you like, and I want to look at that engagement with the serpent and Adam and Eve. I believe that engagement and what they did there was actually where all human brokenness flows from. And I want us to have a look at that scenario if we can. You know, when I talk about evil that resides within us, you might be thinking, well, Annette's going to talk about perhaps bad behaviour or immorality in the world, or things like anger or jealousy, those sort of things. But actually they are the fruit or the result of what I would like to term the original sin. And we see this original sin as we see the serpent and the people actually talking together. The core issue for humanity and their brokenness is seen in this interaction. Romans 1:21 describes it like this: "For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him. But their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened." And that's why I think that this is the original sin. That even though Adam and Eve, the first people, knew who God was, that he was the creator of all things, they knew his goodness, they knew that he loved them, yet they made a decision, a choice, that they would not acknowledge him for who he was, and that they themselves would become like God. I believe this is where all human brokenness flows from, and all that what we would describe immorality or bad behaviour is actually a result or the fruit of that original sin. Hey, I've been using some offensive words today, I think, using that extreme word of evil, but I just used the word sin as well. And I think we don't use that very often anymore. I know, because I think it's an offensive word for many people. I think it's offensive to this generation. But I think the reason why it's offensive is that they believe that an institution like the church or Christians have no right to tell them how to live, what choice of lifestyle they have, or who they want to be. So that's why sin, the word sin, seems to be offensive to people. But can I bring us back to that original meaning of what sin is? And that is that we miss the mark. Then I have a question for you. Whose mark are we missing? If we don't believe in God and we don't believe who he is to us as our Creator, then why would we live up to His mark? How will we know how to flourish as humans if we don't know our designer and we don't know our design? The story of Messiah, which Jesus fulfilled, came to hit the mark for us. We are going to take communion today, and one of the things we do is remember what Jesus did on the cross. That work that He did actually hit the mark for you and I to really reach that perfection of humanity that we were designed to reach and simply can't. The story of Messiah is a good news story for you and I. It helps us, once again, give us opportunity to make a choice. To make a choice to acknowledge God for who He is, but also to make the choice of who He is to us. You've got to understand, even in my own life, that this is a highly personal decision to make. That I've had to, in my own life, over years, continually make that choice to understand and acknowledge who God is, and in particular who He is to me personally. The story of Messiah is not finished yet. As we move into our future, we will continue to see this story unfold in a story of hope and restoration for humanity. Until that day when Jesus fulfills the story of Messiah and defeats evil forever. Today we're going to take communion, and I want to invite you and whoever is around you to actually take the bread and the cup today and reflect on the story of Messiah. In a moment we're going to have a worship time, but before we do, let me pray for you. Lord, I just thank You for every person listening this morning. Perhaps, Lord, they are overwhelmed with what they would see as evil in the world or even in their own lives. Lord, I pray as they take the cup and the bread and remember and reflect on what You did for them, Jesus, that they will have that sense of freedom from everything that is affecting them today. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
This is a story like no other, none that ever was or will be again. This is a story of Jesus, who gave it all to set me free. He was fully man, yet fully God. He walked the earth just as we are. He ate the bread that we now eat and breathed the air that we now how you set me free. Your love is like no other. Your love is like no other. Your love is like no other, I believe. Your love is like no other. Your love is like no other. Your love is like no other, I believe. You are so good, Jesus. You're alive. You live in me. You're alive. You set me free. 'Cause you're alive. And I believe it. I believe it. I believe it. Your love is like no other. 'Cause you loved me like no other. And you loved me like no other. Again and again, again and again. Your love is like no other. 'Cause you love me like no other. And you love me like no other again. This is the story of Jesus. This is the story. This is his story. This is the story of Jesus. Faithful in the sanctuary, faithful in the storm, worthy in the empty spaces, worthy in my soul. 1,000 years of endless praise will never be enough. Through it all, my heart will cling to your unfailing love. Even if the drum stops beating, my soul will keep on singing. Even louder, even louder. Even when my eyes can't see it, I'll sing till I believe it. Even louder, even louder. You are holy in the highest places, holy in the flood. Even in a world that's changing, I will lift you up. 1,000 years of endless praise will never be enough. Through it all, my heart will cling to your unfailing love. Even if the drum stops beating, my soul will keep on singing. Even louder, even louder. Even when my eyes can't see it, I'll sing till I believe it. Even louder, even louder. Oh, I will sing. Hey. Oh, I will sing your promise in the dark of the valley, until I see your goodness in the land of the living. I will sing your promise in the dark of the valley, until I see your goodness in the land of the living. Oh, I will sing your promise in the dark of the valley, until I see your goodness in the land of the living. Oh, even if the drum stops beating, my soul will keep on singing. Even louder, even louder. Even if my eyes can't see it, I'll sing till I believe it. Even louder, even louder. Yeah. I will sing.
The Stories for Our Future series has prompted some great questions. One of them is, what does discipleship look like now? And I'm joined today by Attila and Todd, two great lighthouse men, to talk about just this. So guys, I want to ask you some questions. Todd, can I start with you? What does discipleship in the Bible and discipleship now have in common?
Yeah, good question. I think obviously Jesus is present physically in the Bible times, and now he's present with us by his Spirit.
Yeah.
So there's that crosses over, and I guess whilst the message really hasn't changed as it's come through, for me, one thing I always think about is how there was the existence of religion back then, and churches and traditions, and that still is very much available to us today. But I love that Jesus was always present with people.
Yes.
And it was always, for me, the stories that stand out are when Jesus meets with the woman at the well, or on the hillside, or down by the lake. It was just he was just going about life, really.
Yeah.
And so, that's something that I think is still present today. Discipleship doesn't have to happen in a building. It just happens organically and naturally wherever you're at.
Yeah, he sort of unhinged everything from the temple and took it to the marketplace or the seaside, and wonderful. I love that. Attila, what do you think are some of the differences between how Jesus did discipleship and then what our lives look like now?
Well, I actually think nothing really changed if you really look carefully. I mean, humans are the same. The human condition, your sorrows, your joys are the same. And I think Jesus didn't change at all. So I think he's perfectly capable of discipling now. Of course, there are many things we could list that our society is different, but I think fundamentally it's the same job, and he's God and he's up to it, I think, and we're just gonna follow.
It's interesting that you say follow, because Jesus asked his disciples to come and follow him, and then gives us the model to make disciples or create followers of faith. So who are you guys following when it comes to faith?
Yeah, so Attila and I are in a Connect group, and we meet fortnightly, and that's really good with John Little. And we also obviously attend Lighthouse Church, so sitting under Paul's teaching and Annette. But we're both, I think, very much aware of the fact that we're following God through the relationships that we have, and also it's a responsibility that we have, I guess, with our children, our families, to lead them and teach them to be followers of Christ as well.
So as a young dad speaking to some older dads, what would you say? How do you disciple your household? How do you disciple your kids? It seems like a big burden to me to do that.
It is a fairly new job to me to lead, not even trying, but having that thought of leading my kids to Jesus and to, I guess, a heavenly life. I didn't really know how to go about it, to be honest, and it did feel like a fairly heavy burden because they have so many influence and it's just one person, right?
Right.
So obviously we read the Bible and they enjoy the stories, but recently we just had a story where which I didn't expect. I thought it was gonna be all up to me.
Right.
But this story taught me that actually I'm not alone in this.
Wow.
Actually, there's probably very little that I can do. It's actually God's personal revelation to, I think, our young generation that is required. And maybe they're gonna be disciplining us very soon. I wouldn't mind actually that.
Yeah. So you had a great story unfold with your daughter, Attila, about fishing, of all things.
Right.
Tell us what happened.
So normally on Tuesdays, I drop her off to dance and I've got 2 hours kind of a me time. for the last probably 6 weeks, I've been going fishing during this time, and then I pick her up again. And then, so a couple of weeks ago when I pick her up, then she asked me in the car, did you go fishing? And I said, no, I didn't. I actually had a meeting. And then a few minutes later, she asked, well, who did you meet? And I said, well, I met John. And then she explains to me that she popped a question to go the night before, one of her first prayers really, with her own initiative, that if he's real and the stories of the Bible is real, then Dad shouldn't go fishing tomorrow.
Okay.
So that sort of killed my fishing time, but we had a very good meeting with John actually. But it actually made me really happy because it's such an innocent little question with almost no significance to anyone.
Yeah.
You know, the world is full of troubles, and I guess in God's department, all these prayer requests coming in, and somehow my daughters, or I think many other daughters and kids and sons' requests comes in front, and they somehow get the stamp of high priority.
Right.
We're definitely doing this, and we're doing it straight away.
Yeah.
All the other things we can sort out, and they will be all good, but we're doing this.
God's present and alive to them, even in the seemingly trivial stuff.
I mean, this is one big thing on my heart, that the young generation have the same opportunity, if not bigger, in terms of actually meeting God and having that personal revelation.
Yeah.
We kind of think, well, it happened to us, you know, what the different Christian movements, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I think we don't have to worry too much. I think God's going to take care of this, and he's got it in his hands.
It's almost like we need to release ourselves from having to work at it and tune ourselves in on how to be sensitive to what God is up to. So what have you guys learned about how to be sensitive? How do you be sensitive to what God's doing in your workplace or in your family when you get home?
Yeah, I think it's about creating space, I guess. Like for me, I'm finding some challenges at work at the moment. I'm a couple of years into a new job in the welfare environment, and God is really with me all the time, and I always sense his presence because I've been given great opportunities. But with that has been a lot of challenge, and there's been people in the workplace that oppose some of those challenges, some of the advancements, I guess.
Sure.
But something I do, I've been trying to go for a walk at lunch.
Yep.
And I just walk over to the ocean, and for me, I love to encounter God in nature. So when I'm over there, just having a quick walk at lunchtime, and then I come back afresh, and it really refreshes me and helps me in my afternoon meetings at work often as well.
Yeah, right. How about you, Attila? What have you learned, or what do you do to ensure that you're sensitive to God in the moment that you're in?
Well, I find it very important to declutter your life. So if it's too crowded and it's too much information, very easy to just get sidetracked. And I found some very interesting stories, shocking stories in the Bible. One was with Jeremiah, that they came to him to ask a question. He was in absolute terrible situation. You know, he was already inside the prison, and it took 10 days God to respond to him, who was really suffering for God's word. And I don't even know if I have 10 days to wait for an answer, if you know what I mean. If your McDonald's is 5 minutes late, you're kind of thinking whether you should get extra fries. So I think that sort of mentality doesn't always help.
Right.
So it's good to declutter. And I think what I've been learning is really patient. I'm not a very patient person.
Right.
So I think this year, if anything, taught me that's a very good thing to do.
Guys, thank you so much for sharing with us a little bit about how faith is alive and active in the everyday circumstances, and how you've learned to disciple yourselves and each other and your kids and stuff. It's been fantastic for us to hear. It's a great conversation we're having right across Lighthouse, is what does discipleship look like? So I want to invite you to do that this week in your Connect group, or perhaps with the people you're watching this with. Thanks for being with us.
If this is your first time joining us online, we just want to give you an extra special welcome. So why don't you jump on the website, click the connect button, and one of our team will be in touch. At Lighthouse, we want to stand by you and your family. So why don't you click that same connect button so you can tell us how we can best pray for you this week. We want to invite you to join one of our awesome connect groups. They're a great way to strengthen your faith, have community and connection. So email Andy Flaherty. Our amazing kids resources are updated every week, so jump online to our website to check them out. Our Lighthouse Youth Friday night program is kicking off this week, so if you have any young people in your life, get them to jump online to our Instagram page for all the details. Our live streams are kicking off on the 18th of October here at the station and at the Woolshed as well. Places are limited, so please jump onto our website to secure your spot. Thank you for joining our online gathering today. Hope you have an amazing week.